Okay, so
beautiful. Nice.
Okay, we'll get
started. Do you want to sit? Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone to the third and final session with Cassie that she's been taking us on this journey over the last, it must be 12 weeks now since we started, surely. It's a scary thought.
Sounds right. Yeah, sounds right to me.
Cass is going to do a little bit of a recap on the last session. So if you remember, our very first conversation was really introducing us all to this idea of self-fidelity. And then this masterclass that we've been on the last two sessions, so today in the last session, is really diving into the detail of what actually is self-fidelity. So I will hand over to Cassie in a second to share more detail. As is always the case, part of the purpose of the chapter lead conversations is to really bring ideas and thoughts to life, and whilst obviously part of it is having someone to present, is also all of you really actively participating in the conversation as well, asking lots of questions and doing that in a way in which you feel really comfortable with. This is absolutely a safe space. That is what makes these conversations beautiful. And whilst obviously we're recording this, we're recording it for the purpose of making sure that any of you that might want to kind of dive into the details, that we can share all of those links with you as well. So on that note, I'm going to introduce Cassie, who again is probably the third time that for some of you are meeting her. Some of you may know her as well. I won't make any assumptions. As I've mentioned in previous session, Cassie is the innovator of self-fidelity, and I've had the pleasure of attending one of her workshops, and actually went with my sister, which was beautiful. I think sometimes you don't do this development stuff with people that know you really well. It really hit a chord with me. I've read the book. I've actually bought the book for a lot of people. It's been a beautiful gift to give, particularly in times like we're in now. So I'm super excited that we're here at the second of our masterclass for Cassie to take us through this brilliant work. Over to you, Cass.
Thank you so much, Alana, and thank you to all of you who've joined this morning for this masterclass. I'm literally living the dream to have the opportunity to explore this concept of what does it mean to be true to ourselves when we live in a world that is constantly trying to convince us that who we really are is somehow inadequate or inconvenient, or sometimes perhaps both. And so I'm so excited to have this opportunity to host these conversations. And so we had a lot of people register for today, and for those of you who came to the first part of the masterclass, we are going to do a recap on all elements of the self-fidelity practice. But we're going to do that recap in a way that's fresh and hopefully fun. So I'm hoping that none of this feels repetitive to those of you who came to the last masterclass. And for those of you who missed the first masterclass, I hope that you find that this builds and I provide the right context for the conversation today. So we've got an hour together, and I really do, as Alana said, want to make sure that there's a conversation that takes place today about this concept of being true to ourselves, an idea that's very close to my heart. And so if we just have a look at what we kind of, how we describe this masterclass, we said this is for you if you're sick and tired of trying to fix, mold, or prove yourself. If you believe, like me, that our work has a potential to be life-enhancing rather than soul-destroying, and if you want to experience greater vitality and happiness at work and in life, you want to activate more of the unique potential you bring to the world, and you want to learn to restore trust in the very best version of yourself, then I think self-fidelity is a practice that offers you many of those aspects and hopefully more. So this is how I describe myself, and this is always evolving. Of someone says, "So what do you do?" Now I'm describing myself as this kind of authenticity activator, and someone who really just loves to work with busy, big-hearted leaders to experience more authentic empowerment, to really step in to the very best versions of ourselves, the most powerful versions of ourselves more often at work and in all facets of our life. And this is the work that absolutely lights me up. So what can you expect over the next hour? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about, what for me inspired this term, self-fidelity. So if you've never heard of that term, don't be concerned. It's a term that I coined. I think it was midway through the first lockdown here in Melbourne, and as I was deep in the process of writing my book, and I termed this I coined this term of self-fidelity, which is this idea of restoring faith and trust in ourselves, in the very best version of ourselves. So I'm going to explain what I understand to be this practice of self-fidelity. I'm going to explain a little bit about why it matters to me and why I think it matters more generally on planet Earth at this very challenging time we find ourselves in. And then we're going to dive into the practice, and I'm going to walk us through the different elements of a self-fidelity practice as I understand them today, and hopefully leave you all with some practical ways that you can start practicing this idea of being true to yourselves, and through that practice restore faith in yourself and also faith in each other. Any questions before we begin? No,
it sounds wonderful.
Okay, let's dive in. So, we've all seen this quote by William Shakespeare, "This above all, to thine own self be true." And when I think about this idea, and the reason why it resonates across so many cultures, is that it's the truth. For me, though, the challenge has always been in the how. We know that the biggest regret of the dying from the work of palliative care nurse Bronnie Weir is that we haven't lived a life that is true to ourselves. That is reported as the number one regret of the dying. And so it's good to know that this is how we should be. We should be true to ourselves, but the challenge is in the how. How do we actually do that? James Clear recently tweeted this quote that it's a daily battle to be ourselves, not merely what the world wants of us. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of battling. It's kind of sick of the battle. You're soldiering on the mask, the armor, the heaviness, the combativeness of all of that. It's just exhausting. And for me, I think there's got to be an alternative to have to battle to be who we are. And for me, that alternative is the idea of a practice, a gentle daily practice. And I recently came across this work from Arianna Huffington, and she said there's lots of signposts that tell us to make more money and climb the ladder, but there'll be almost no signposts that remind us to stay connected to our essence, the truth of who we are, and to take care of ourselves along the way. And I think that's so true. And for me, my self-fidelity practice is that daily, moment-by-moment reminder, and this ability to remember who I really am at my core and stay true to that version of myself. So this is how I define self-fidelity, which was my first challenge when I sat down to actually write my book. And writing my book actually took me three years, and there's a lot of research in here around these concepts. But when I thought about, well, how do I define self-fidelity? The first challenge was, well, what part of myself do I want to cultivate trust to? It's not as simple as saying being true to ourselves, because I don't know about you, but I have lots of different parts. I have lots of different voices in my head, which often give me conflicting advice on what to do next. And I know myself, I would be in a very slippery slope if I cultivated faith to the wrong part of me, the part of me that's a striving, proving part, the part of me that's afraid. So the first key distinction was for me to be clear on, well, what are we cultivating faith to? And for me, it's cultivating faith and trust in my essence, my core, the very best qualities of human nature in the way that they represent themselves through me. And we'll talk more about what my understanding of our essence or essential nature is. But that's really the practice. It's a practice of being true, being faithful to the very best, most powerful, most positive version of ourselves and the qualities that we were all born with as humans. So how do we practice self-fidelity? The way I practice is through these four aspects of an ongoing learning loop. It's about waking up, remembering the truth of who I am, letting be these strong qualities within myself, letting go of the masks and the armor and the things that weigh me down and keep me hidden, and letting in the nourishment I need to have the strength and the endurance and the vitality to be the best version of myself. So these are the elements as I understand them. And in the first masterclass, we focused on the waking up, letting be. We will do another sweep through of those two elements and then focus on the letting go and letting in today. So let me just give a brief summary of why this idea of being true to ourselves means so much to me. So I grew up in a working class family on the outskirts of Sydney, and throughout all of my childhood, my father suffered terribly from workplace related stress. He was working for the Premier's department in the city of Sydney, and he couldn't be his true self every day. And he came home most nights depleted and downtrodden. And I think in this photo, you know, for me, Dad's smile doesn't go to his eyes and he looks really, really tired. And what that meant for me as a young girl, for many of us who grew up in kind of a pressurized household, it meant that I really didn't have a lot of faith in myself, in my feelings particularly. I learned at a young age that my feelings were actually, not only were they not valid, they were also very problematic. At times, my feelings felt dangerous. And so from a very young age, I decided to transform myself into what I now describe as this kind of super high achieving, low maintenance kind of machine. And I had actually assigned all my value in the world to these external achievements and my capacity to be low maintenance. And that really created a lot of hardship in my early adulthood, and these ways of being that were anchored in striving and proving and trying to collect gold stars as proof that I was enough. And now as I look back, I equate that way of being as having kind of a coal-fired energy source. It's the equivalent of me of a coal-fired energy source. It was very powerful, and it kind of thrust me to really great success in the corporate world. You know, I was perfect for the corporate world. I was hardworking, super conscientious, collecting all the gold stars, jumping through all the burning hoops, and I really propelled my career to great heights. But what I couldn't see at the time was that energy source of the proving and the striving and not feeling I was enough was heavily polluting and in no way sustainable. I now compare the energy of being connected to my essence and knowing that I am enough and really harnessing these qualities within myself as a source of fuel, as the equivalent of a green energy, sustainable energy source. And so this is my new understanding of what is available to us when we kind of plug into our essence as a source of fuel, as a source of energy, as an alternative to the proving, striving energy that so many of us kind of are conditioned to rely on. Does that resonate with any of you, these different energy sources? I'm seeing Kathy nod her head. Yeah. So yeah, it's a challenge for so many of us, and when you work in the corporate world, it's so much the norm, isn't it, to be unhealthy, striving, and proving that, you know, the fact that you've got this unsustainable energy source is really hard to have awareness of when everyone around you is doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting, Cassie. I've been reflecting on, you know, all this dialogue we're hearing at the moment around the Great Resignation, and I think it's really interesting when we kind of unpack that to think about what is it that's instigating, you know, people to start to really reflect on what is it that they want out of their work and how they define work for them. And, you know, I've seen a number of people around me who, don't get me wrong, I know this will impact lots of different, you know, cultures and communities in a really different way, but they've been fortunate enough to be in a position where they can choose to exit the workforce because of how they're feeling. And the way that I've been thinking about it and talking about it is, I think we're at this point in time where for so long, the way in which we've defined our happiness at work or our level of engagement hasn't necessarily been the job itself, right? It's because I work with great people. It's because of the organisation does A, B, and C. It's all of these actual external factors beyond kind of the work itself and the purpose that perhaps, or the meaning that I get from the work itself. And I think the last 18 months, that has all gone. All of those external elements has been eliminated from where perhaps we've created joy and meaning in our day-to-day work. And it has absolutely become about the job, but this real introspection around, what does it mean for me? How am I creating my own meaning and joy when it is actually now just about the work? Because all of those great mates that I went and had coffee with, or the great initiatives the organisation put on, it's not happening anymore. And I think when you layer in this energy component, it's such a critical piece of the way that people are choosing to engage in work now.
Yeah, I think this is a moment where we've had this big pause, and it's time to recalibrate and reimagine work and reflect on what used to drive us in the old world, what used to drive us and all our colleagues, and what really we want to be fueled by in this next chapter of our working lives. And I think as we have kind of extracted ourselves from what can often be, a heavily polluted environment where everyone is fueled by this same unhealthy energy of unhealthy striving and proving. I want to make it clear. I know there's a role for healthy striving. I'm talking about the unhealthy striving and the proving energy. When we've extracted ourselves from those environments and we've connected to our families more, maybe we've connected to nature, we've connected to our bodies, back into our bodies. Yes, we're glimpsing this alternative way of being, this alternative energy source that is just as, I would say, even more uplifting, more powerful, but it's sustainable and it doesn't have the pollution.
Yes.
So there's a chance we have to unplug and re-plug into something different. And that pause, as you so beautifully described, gives us that opportunity to reimagine and recalibrate, because so much of how we used to how we used to work makes no sense at all.
No, correct. Yeah, correct. And it's interesting, I think also looking at, for me, I've got two little boys that have spent a lot of time at home, and their observation of the role that work plays in my life, because they're seeing it much more than they've ever seen it. So it's also this piece of, I've had lots of moments where I think, what sort of, like, what is this telling my children about the way in which we work? Which is, again, it's this kind of pause moment of how much work is taking up of our lives, and is that the message that I want my kids to take away?
Brilliant. Yes, I think you're not alone in these.
No, I can see lots of heads.
The new questions with new answers that lead us to a new work-life design. So this is, I think, such a wonderful time for us to be being open and curious about this practice of self-fidelity as a way to guide us through these choices that we now have the opportunity to make about how we want to be at work, what sort of environments we want to work with, what we want to tap into as our energy source to carry us a distance over our careers. So when I think about this idea of plugging into my essential nature as an energy source, I kind of think about it as these amazing different sources of power. And each source is one of our virtues. So we know that we all share these incredible virtues as human beings, that we are all courageous. We are all compassionate, caring beings. At our core, we are calm, we are confident, we are all creative, we're connected, we're clear, we're curious, and we're playful, just to name some of the incredible virtues that are within us as human beings. And so part of the practice of my self-fidelity practice is really thinking about dialing up these virtues in moments that matter and making sure I have free access to these. And I'm starting to use this graphic equalizer image to bring that concept to life. And we'll talk more about that.
Love it.
So that's a little bit about why self-fidelity matters to me. And throughout my career, I had leaders directly, tell me the problem with you, Cassie, is that you care too much. If you want to make your executive role, you've got to learn how to care less. I was given that direct feedback. And so for me, being able to respectfully, decline that well-meaning but ill-advised advice and really plug into these energy sources, it has been a really key part of my growth as a leader and now as the founder of the Centre for Self-Fidelity. So why does it matter more broadly, though? We know that so many of us can't really feel like we can't be ourselves at work. And the psychologists would call this surface acting. And this is a great quote from Dr. Susan David, someone, I've been fortunate to meet in my work with Thrive Global, and someone that I've got so much respect for. And Susan says, when people habitually evoke the stress of surface acting, they'll be more prone to depression, anxiety, decreased performance, and ultimately burnout. And this surface acting is when there's incongruence between how we really feel on the inside at our core and how we feel we need to show up in the world. And often we know that surface acting is something that's really prevalent in the workplace. And so this is one of the reasons we're seeing these shocking statistics, right? That 3 in 4 of us will experience some level of burnout over our careers, which to me is just absolutely a horrific statistic. And we know on the flip side, if we think the downside is at the worst, at the pointy end of the downside, we're looking at burnout, the risk of burnout. The upside, of course, of connecting into some of our strengths, on the best virtues that are within us, all these sorts of uplifts that we can see, not only in our performance, but our engagement, our meaning and satisfaction, as you talked about, Alana, and chances of thriving in the world. A recent study by INSEAD showed shockingly that only 1 in 2 of us are actually willing to be vulnerable at work. And of course, this is a big challenge because without vulnerability, thanks Brene Brown, we know that there's no courage. And gosh, don't we need to be courageous leaders at this really challenging time? So this really caught my eye, this recent statistic, and speaks to me of people who are disconnected from their essence, of their courageous essence. And we also know that there's this link when we have empathetic leaders who are working from a connection to their caring, connected nature, which is the gateway, of course, to empathy. We know that there's also a massive uptick in innovation. And again, if you think about what's required most in the working world right now, I would think courage and innovation are probably the things we need to be harnessing to co-create a new way of working together in this new paradigm of work.
Yeah.
So let's now dive into a little bit more about, well, how do we actually practice this thing called self-fidelity, this idea of practicing this restoring of faith and trust in the best version of ourselves. So let's start with waking up. So when we think about waking up, for me, the essence of that is a process of remembering. And it's a remembering that none of the voices in my head are a reflection of my essence, of the real me. And actually, Richard Schwartz says this really beautifully. He says, actually, what we call thinking is actually the inner dialogue between these different parts of ourselves. And when I learnt this was life-changing for me to discover the work of Richard Schwartz, who works around a process called IFS, internal family systems. And Richard Schwartz has spent 30 years working with clients to get to know their parts, the different parts of them, the different voices in their head. And this was a game changer to start to associate the different parts of me, the different voices in my head with these different kind of components of my personality, and none of which were really connected to my most positive and powerful attributes. And so one way we can illustrate this idea is through this wonderful movie, Inside Out. Give me an emoji if you've seen this fabulous Pixar movie, Inside Out. I'm seeing a few smiling faces. Yeah.
I love this movie so much. Oh my gosh.
This is great. Richard Schwartz, I listen to him a lot, and when he talks, he often refers to the movie Inside Out as this amazing representation of these parts of ourselves, these kind of naughty, pesky little parts of ourselves that can often get in control of our decisions. So I'll play a little clip for those of you who haven't seen it that I think really kind of brings this to life.
Go. All right. I open?
This looks new.
Think it's safe?
What is it?
Okay, caution. There is a dangerous smell, people. Hold on, what is that?
This is disgust. She basically keeps Riley from being poisoned, physically and socially.
That is not brightly colored or shaped like a dinosaur. Hold on, guys. It's broccoli! Yeah! Well, I just saved our lives. Yeah, you're welcome.
Riley, if you don't eat your dinner, you're not going to get any dessert.
Wait, did he just say we couldn't have dessert?
That's anger. He cares very deeply about things being fair.
So that's how you want to play it, old man? No dessert? Oh, sure. We'll eat our dinner right after you eat this.
Right. It's an airplane.
Oh, airplane. We got an airplane, everybody.
Okay, so I'm sure that clip's familiar to many of you, and you know, when I think about it in my inner world, stepping into the most empowered version of myself, I think about that moment at the end when Riley stepped in, the most empowered version of her, the taller girl with the blue hair, and she took back control. And really waking up is about the realization, there's a part of me that's that disempowered part of me, perhaps a part of me that's coming from fear in the driver's seat right now. How do I gently take back control of the wheel, or in this case, the control panel of the choices and decisions that I'm making? So if you want to have a little journey into my inner world, you know, if you're game, I wanted to share a little bit about what I figured out about my parts. And what the research would show, that often our parts fall into one of these three categories. So we have these inner managers. Our inner manager really wants to maintain this illusion that we're in control. So for me, my inner manager on a good day, the house will be clean, my nails will be done, my kids won't have dropped the F-bomb, my more than once. She's dropping her F-bomb standards since lockdown.
Yeah.
My kids want to drop the F-bomb too frequently. My to-do list will be on one page. My skinny jeans will do up.
That's another downside of lockdown, right?
Another downside of lockdown. And so she's got this list of criteria, and all these things are in order, then we're doing okay. Right. And I do think this inner manager is the older version of that photo that you saw of the high achieving, low maintenance machine who really wants things in order and wants to maintain this illusion that I am in control. So that's my inner manager. And sometimes in my book, I talk about that some of these parts of me have these tracks that they play in my head, and her track is everything is urgent. And to kind of take the power out of that, I imagine her saying that now, actually using the Lego soundtrack song. And so when I was like, everything is urgent. Yeah. That's how I've learned to take power out of her motto. Can anyone relate to the inner manager?
Oh, yeah.
Jess is laughing. Do you hear everything is urgent? Or is that just me?
Yeah, Mim's like, yes.
All right, so that's my inner manager. And perhaps you have a version of her. And this part of us, of course, is absorbed from the external voices that we've been exposed to in our lives. And you know, what might start in our life as this kind of externalized oppression to meet certain standards becomes an internalized oppression over time.
Yeah.
So that's my inner manager, and the more I work with this with my own coach and my own development, the more inner managers I discover. You know, I am really like this babushka doll. You think you've got to the middle, it's like, oh my God, there's another layer. There's another one. So if you chop me open like a tree, I would have all these rings of parts.
Love it.
So my inner rescuer, her job is to hose things down when she feels like things are going to be overwhelming. So my inner rescuer is a part of me at about 5 o'clock starts thinking about a large glass of red wine to take the edge off the day. So she's the one that will be the voice that leads me to things that might numb, because my inner rescuer is really scared of being overwhelmed. So her motto is, I can't handle this. So when I hear that voice, I can't handle this, I can't handle this, I know that she's in the driver's seat of my thinking and choices. And the way I've diffused her song is I imagine it to MC Hammer. You can't touch this.
Yeah.
And again, when I have that thought, you can't handle this, I'll quickly think, you can't handle this. No.
Yeah.
And that to me creates some lightness and play in her voice. So that's my inner rescuer. And then we have this other cluster of parts. And again, there might be several of these parts, the inner child. These are the parts of us that are the most vulnerable and afraid. So when I'm in a coaching session and I'm in contact with my inner child, I will physically curl up. When I'm with my husband and we're having a difficult conversation, I'm hijacked by my inner child, I'll actually not be able to maintain eye contact with my husband of 10 years. That's my tell that she's in the driver's seat. She can't even look her husband in the eye because, of course, she doesn't think it's her husband. She thinks it's her father, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about my inner parts and how I'm getting to know them. My inner child actually has no song because she has no voice. She's very small and quiet. And so these are the parts of me that get into the driver's seat of my choices, that, in the inside out equivalent, they're the ones on the control panel. So really, for me, when I think about this idea of waking up, it's really about taking back control of that control panel. So let me go to this slide. So to wake up is to take back that control, as Riley is getting up there. And, I have all sorts of rituals to take care of my parts, to let them know that they're safe, that I can actually step into the most empowered version of myself. I can look my husband in the eye. I can prioritize. I can live with nails that aren't done and elastic waist jeans for a while. So maybe we'll pause there and I'll just ask, do you recognize your parts? When do they tend to take control, and do you have any sense of what they might be afraid of?
Kathy, Ayan has put in the chat here, I struggle with being the inner manager versus being an actual human.
So your inner manager is a human. I think that's an important distinction. And what we don't want to do is demonize any of these parts or reject any of these parts. The work really starts with an appreciation. The gateway to changing our relationships with these parts is a deep sense of appreciation, because, I'll talk to my inner manager. She appeared at a time in my life where she was really essential, right? She helped me feel like I had value in the world. When I couldn't express my feelings at home, she's the one who got me ducks at my school. She's the one who got me my scholarship to university. She's created all these opportunities for me. And she's done so from a good intention of wanting to feel like I was enough and that I had value. And so an important nuance here is not to demonize. So these parts are all human and they're all have a good intent. And we'll talk later about, as we do this work, how we can transform these parts into more of an advisory role that's going to actually offer more useful advice and lead us to make better choices. So don't dehumanize these parts. These are full range personalities that exist within us, and they've all served us well, and they're all actually heroes. Often when I do this work with my coaching clients, there's a lot of tears that come with this work, particularly around the inner child work, when we start to really set this sense of appreciation for what the burdens that these parts have carried, the heroes that they've been in our lives. I mean, for me, to speak really openly, I lived for almost 10 years with domestic violence in a relationship in my 30s. And I know for sure that inner child, the part of me that could be small and quiet, could have actually saved my life.
Yeah.
So these parts of us play important roles. So don't demonize them, don't dehumanize them, show them love. And through that love and appreciation, they will transform. And we'll talk more about how they transform.
Yeah, there's some beautiful comments in the chat. Mel's shared that the inner manager is definitely about rejection, feeling important. Vincent's saying, yes, super high achieving inner manager, being very harsh to yourself, high standards.
Yeah.
rescuer to let ourselves go, deemed as weak, inner child, need to let go as the environment was cold and self-survival.
Yeah, and so many of us have these similar patterns, right? The inner manager is often called the inner critic. I think
Yes.
Brown calls it the obnoxious roommate in her head. So we all have a version of this. The inner rescuer is the part of us that's prone to numbing, whether that's overworking, social media, Netflix, drugs, alcohol, you name it. The inner rescuer, depending on how fearful they are that the system's going to be overwhelmed, that they will numb the escalation, numbing tactics can escalate, and that's where, of course, our addictive tendencies come from. So we all have these parts, and getting to know these parts with gentle way, with support and guidance, is really life-changing work. It has been for me. So let's move on. So we're getting a sense for this waking up. Waking up is to realize for me, there's someone else in the driver's seat right now. This is not the grown-ass 46-year-old version of me. Because, of course, these parts don't realize that, I'll use my term, I'm a grown-ass woman, and I've actually got this. These parts of us are frozen in time often. So for me to wake up is, someone else is in the driver's seat now. How do I gently and calmly take back control of the panel? So that's waking up. And a simple language we can start to play around with here is just to start referencing your parts in the way you speak. And a simple way of that, maybe in a moment of overwhelm, you might say, rather than I am frustrated or I am angry, you might just say, part of me is really frustrated. And actually, there's another part of me that's pretty scared. That's the inner child. But none of these parts are the real me. That last bit, I say inside my head as a reminder. That first part, though, is something we can actually say, in relationships, at work, with our partners. Part of me is X, feeling X. And if you are in touch with that deeper part, there's maybe another part at play. Often they work in pairs. This is just language you can start to play around with.
Yeah, I remember, Cass, you saying this. I think when you and I were talking, actually, it may have been at your workshop where you first mentioned this idea of part of me, which was so powerful, because I think in the moment sometimes we can label our whole self. Yeah, that's it. We're done. It's so final. It's and there's no room for that judgment to move outside of the way in which we've labelled ourselves. It's
so key. That what you just said, Alana, is really so key to understand we are multiples. We are not, our psychology is not single dimensional. We are multiples. And this is not, pathologizing our inner experience. This is the reality, and if you think about people with schizophrenia, Dr. Schwartz would say, well, that's the end of the spectrum, where the trauma's been so great that these parts of us have exploded and actually have taken on a different role, a powerful role. But we are multiples. The language of parts is very normal and natural to us. We just don't talk about it enough. And so, yes, when we start to recognize these parts of ourselves and we give them language, then we can rise above all those parts. But when we identify as our parts in the way we speak and the way we think, then we're locked into that disempowered version of ourselves. Yeah. So let's keep going, and then let's move on to this idea of letting be. So for me, when we think about letting be, it's not holding the beach ball underwater anymore. And for me in my corporate life, I've spent 20 plus years working for big businesses here in Australia and overseas. And often I just felt like I was holding a beach ball underwater, trying to suppress parts of myself. Often I would be trying to suppress my caring part of myself. I might be suppressing my playful nature or other elements of my central nature that the environment perhaps conditioned me to believe weren't appropriate. And of course, we can only hold a beach ball underwater for so long. It's wobbly, it's exhausting, and often these parts of ourselves can pop up in inappropriate and exaggerated ways. That was my experience anyway. I'm a natural playful being, but if I've suppressed my playful nature for long enough, sometimes I might say a very inappropriate joke. And I've learned that the hard way, that I've got to let my playful nature constantly be expressed to avoid this kind of really awkward moments. So really letting be is about refusing to hold the beach ball underwater, to have free access to these beautiful qualities that are within us. And, you know, when I think about my essential nature, I literally think about going into the pharmacy and seeing all these bottles of essential oils and really figuring out, well, what is the unique blend? How do all of these qualities and virtues express themselves through me in a unique way? And what I've learned is actually, it's not enough to love what we do. I actually, in my graduation yearbook from university, I remember feeling very wise at the ripe old age of 21 and writing in my university graduation book, when we love what we do, we'll never work a day in our lives.
Yeah.
And at the time, I really believed that. And for many years, I did believe that. But now I understand it's not that straightforward. Not only do we have to love what we do, we've got to love who we're being while we're doing it. And my self-fidelity practice has given me that very important second condition of vitality and feeling fulfilled. So, that's letting be. And when we are free to access these qualities within ourselves, that is when we're experiencing true, authentic empowerment. So that's letting be. Let's look at letting go then. So what is it exactly that we're letting go of? What are we shedding? So letting go, of course, is the process of shedding what no longer serves us. And for me, the shedding is letting go of some of these tactics, of these parts of me. And of course, to let them go, we've got to first be aware of them. So the awareness is the precursor to the letting go. But what I think about is that these parts of me don't have full access to these qualities. They have the potential to access these qualities, but often their connection to these qualities has been severed or significantly diminished. It's like these qualities have almost become corrupted, a corrupted expression of these qualities through these parts of myself. So my manager doesn't really understand healthy striving. Her energy is really around proving an unhealthy striving. So it's a corrupted expression of these essential qualities. The other way to think about it, if we build on this idea of the graphic equalizer, see those three switches that are set down, you know, each part of me has these settings, and my manager would say, there's no time for play at work. Dial down your caring nature, lock your heart away for safekeeping, don't let anyone see that you're struggling. And so each part of me has this kind of these settings of these qualities that they don't have full access, and they're not able to dial up and access all these qualities of my essential nature, my caring, my courage, my connectedness, my playfulness, my creativity. These things are not available to these parts of me. And when they do become available, these parts of me can find far better roles to play. So my inner manager can actually be really helpful. You know, I am super conscientious. If I do any sort of conscientious diagnostic, I'm always like a 9 out of 10 for conscientiousness. And that's my inner manager. And that can be a really helpful thing. You know, my diary's in order. I stay on top of my to-do list. I say what I mean what I say. I follow through on my commitments. And so my inner manager can become this kind of support. You know, the world's greatest inner EA who's going to help me fulfill my commitments. She's great at that. And my inner rescuer who just wants to soothe me and wants to reduce the risk of overwhelm can actually reach for more healthy tactics. She can actually be the one who says, you know, why don't you have a long bath and a hot cup of tea? You know, now evenings when my kids have been dropping their F-bomb and it all feels overwhelming, she now says to me, just walk away, go and run a bath and have half an hour to yourself, and I'll actually do it. Whereas previously, you know, it might be drinking a red wine, which of course creates a different chain of events for me. I'm not going to be as open-hearted and present with my children. So she's still, of course, part of me, but she's playing different roles and suggesting different things. And my inner child, of course, our inner child is where that joy, the spontaneity, the playfulness lives, the creativity lives. And so as we help our inner child to feel safer and help them to understand that they are loved and lovable, then we have access to these beautiful childlike, but not childish, childlike qualities of being in joy, spontaneity, playfulness. Any comments on can you see your parts playing these positive roles in your life, or having the potential to play these positive roles in your life?
I love what you talk about, Kathy, in terms of like, how do you, what are those practices where you can catch the moment where perhaps maybe you're heading down that kind of more negative path and turn it into a positive?
Yeah.
I think sharing some of that is really helpful. How did you identify that though? How did you identify what the right practices were to put in place? And I'm imagining a bit of trial and error is all part of it. Yeah, how do you in those moments? Because I think also Vincent has mentioned this rule of 5, which I love. 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. I think that reflection of like what matters to me now, will it matter in all of these moments when I kind of look forward into the future? Because I think when we're so in that moment and when that other part of us has taken over, we can't see that, right? We can't kind of see that forward looking piece. So I'd love
So for me, the gateway is awareness, right? The more I get to know these parts, the more I understand their motivations and what they're afraid of. That's the awareness piece. And we all have these recurring thoughts. So the recurring thoughts of my inner manager of everything is urgent, and for my inner rescuer, you can't handle this. We'll have our version of those thoughts, right? And these thoughts or beliefs are so pervasive. I heard them described recently. They were described that as vast and deep as the ocean is to a fish. Beliefs and thoughts are vast and deep and invisible. They're just our inner narrative, and that's the value of working with a coach often, because often we have these thoughts so often, the thought that I can't handle this, or the thought there's never enough time, or everything is urgent. It's not until you actually say it that you're like, oh, I do actually think that quite a lot. And when I think that thought, it affects the choices I make. And perhaps there's a different thought I could be thinking. But unless you're doing the work or working with someone, it's so invisible to you. The best way I can describe it is like water to a fish. Does that make sense? Yeah, Kathy, you're nodding your head. And so just start to notice and start writing them down. Like, what are these tracks? What is your equivalent song of everything is urgent and you can't handle this? Like, what are these parts? What are the thoughts that these parts think? So start with awareness. And then for me, the simplest way to kind of reclaim power is to take the power out of those thoughts. So putting them to a funny soundtrack works for me. It kind of takes the power out of the thoughts and the heaviness. And over time, we can reframe it. We can work with reframing. We now know from neuroplasticity that I could have thought that thought, I can't handle it, a million times, but it is possible to start thinking a different thought, right? As a response to stress. And at first, that old neural pathway is strong and thick and we default to it. It's going to take effort to say, I just thought I can't handle it. What's another possibility, which is actually, I've got this. I'm a 46-year-old resourceful woman. I can figure this out. It takes effort to activate the new neural pathway, but the more we activate it, the thicker it gets, and the more able the easier it becomes to do that reframe.
Some great suggestions here in the chat as well. Vincent's talked about mindfulness, using that practice to stop, breathe and reset. Mim's talked about journaling and meditation and therapy, and Jess about supporting that connection and really removing that noise.
Brilliant. Meditation helps us, of course, get in the driver's seat of our thinking and hold our focus and be intentional. Journaling is brilliant, Mim. I completely agree, because these thoughts are slippery, that the mind is so quick to identify and give you 50 reasons why actually you really can't handle it. And it's not until you write it down, I can't handle it, and you could ask yourself, okay, is there a different way of thinking? Is it absolutely true I can't handle it?
Yeah.
What evidence do I have that I can't handle it?
Yeah.
When have I handled this situation in the past? So writing it down is key, because the mind will self-justify. It's slippery. So yeah, all the great suggestions. So let's just move on in the last 7 minutes and just touch on this idea of letting in, which is a final part of my self-fidelity practice. So letting in is really about restoring the foundation of vitality and well-being, because we all know without vitality and well-being, we can't be caring, we can't be courageous, we can't be creative. This is to me almost like the secret sauce that makes all of this possible, which is our vitality, our well-being. And I particularly like the list of needs that comes from the nonviolent communication body of work. And what this body of work would say, that we all have 7 core needs, and there's different versions of these core needs, but I really like this list, that we need connection, we need physical well-being, we need honesty, play, peace, autonomy, and meaning. And so for me, when I think about letting in the nourishment I need to have this base level of well-being and vitality, I refer to this list of needs. And really, we all have different needs. Like, this is I suppose, the catalogue of our common needs as human. But for me, my need for well-being is really high. Zest is my signature strength. So I have a really high need for well-being. So I need to prioritize that need. And if I'm not physically fit, then really I don't have that foundation in place. So it's different for all of us. So really, about letting in is really about being really clear on what fills your cup. What do you need to be prioritizing and honoring in your life, in your working week, in order to create that secret source of vitality that really enables the access to the best version of yourself? And it's a daily practice. I love this quote. This is not something we can schedule on the weekend. So many of us become these weekend warriors. Well, we used to anyway. That I'll exercise on Saturday morning. That's my run. And I had someone in a workshop say yesterday, I'm going to kill myself Monday to Friday and look after myself Saturday. So that was exactly his motto. I'm going to kill myself Monday to Friday, and weekends is when I look after myself. It's like, wow, you're going to kill yourself 5 out of 7 days a week, really?
Yeah.
But that really was his motto in life. So this is a daily, moment by moment practice of how am I going to fill my cup today in this moment. There's so many practical ways that we can do that, and it works. You each know, right, what you need to fill your cup. So many organizations where they lost their way, right? You're feeling depleted? Do this Pilates class. Eat this apple we bought for you. Come on, do this fun lunch. No. It's unique for each person, and you've got to be clear on what your non-negotiables are, how you fill your cup, and find workplaces that will honor that as much as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really interesting, Cass. So much of what you're saying, always resonates with me. But I think this piece in particular, I feel like in this recent time at which we're living, I think a lot of the introspection is, am I actually giving myself what I need right now? Like, I think we've fought so much of, I really need just a moment to breathe, but I'm going to power on through, and I'm going to, work through it. But I think we're all stopping and saying, actually, if I was to be really honest to myself in this moment right now, what is it that I need? Now, a holiday to Hawaii, sure, amazing. Can I do it right now? Maybe not. But, how might I mimic something which gives me a little bit of rest and restoration that at least makes me feel like I'm tuning into those real needs that we have in the moment?
It's brilliant, and it can be small, right, Alana? I had a yoga teacher whose favorite saying was, "We're all just heads on sticks." Like we're so disconnected from our bodies, right? So even if it's like, I need to go to the bathroom right now, I'm actually going to go rather than spend another 10 minutes trying to do my email and holding on. It can be small things. What do I need? I'm thirsty. Am I hungry? No, actually, I'm thirsty. I need to drink. I need to take the edge off. Do I really need to take the edge off? Have a bath instead of a glass of wine. So these don't need to be huge changes in our lives. There could be small things. Even watching the evening news. I've stopped doing that, right? Because what I need is to feel peace before I go to sleep. So there can be small things. So just in the last couple of minutes, I really hope that you've enjoyed these masterclasses. I've volunteered my time for all 3 sessions in the hope that I meet more people who are curious to co-create, either in their own lives or in their organization. So I really would love the opportunity to talk more about these concepts and perhaps bring them to your workplace, which is the work I love to do. So you can find me here on LinkedIn. On my website, there's a free diagnostic tool. I call it the self-reflective inquiry tool, that you can quickly go through and get a sense to what extent are you being true to yourself, and that's completely free. I write a blog every Monday morning. I love to write and create. So if you'd like to subscribe, you'll find me in your inbox every morning with a little bit of a self-fidelity practice to play with in the week ahead. But of course, you can buy my book on my website. And if you use the word friend, the code friend, I will shout shipping for you. And then finally, next year, I'm going to be doing my next intake for my small group coaching program that I call Uplift. So I'm now taking expressions of interest for that coaching program. So if you're interested in perhaps coming along, just drop me a line and I can share more information. So it's been lovely to host this conversation. We've got a minute or two, but if anyone would like to stay back a little bit and ask questions or have a quick conversation, I'm happy to do that. Thank you, Alana, for the opportunity, and Dr. Ann for this platform. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Cassie. And there's lots of love for you in the chat. I think everyone is enjoying taking that moment to stop and reflect. And I think, we go to so many of these webinars and they're about other things we can learn about, things that are external to us, which is amazing. We always want that development and growth. But I think that also there's this moment where we stop and invest in ourselves, and we take these times to learn about how we do it differently. So thank you so much. You've been so insanely generous with your time and sharing this beautiful work that you've created. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today in these conversations. We'll look to continue these discussions as part of obviously the work we do in this chapter lead in Melbourne. But for anyone, yes, if you've got any questions, we have got a couple more seconds, but absolutely we've got the beautiful Cassie here to ask anything that's on your mind. Thanks, Jess.
Hey, Mim.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, Cass. You're really just so wonderful at what you do. I've loved your book, and just seeing you bring the concepts alive through facilitation has been a gift. So thank you so much, and to you too, Alana.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Take care of yourself and your recovery.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Vincent. Thanks, Rosie, so much for your participation today as well.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Alana. We'll sign off.
We will.
Recording.
Yeah, you stop recording. Beautiful.